Let the man speak. There's something in his eyes you should see.
You call it disrespect, I call it miles. Names, not rips.
Good. You carry it like a vow?
It didn't lose. It survived. Luis Morales, my brother. This flag rode 6 tours with him. It came back when he didn't.
Yeah. Hawk Jennings on there too?
He signed it. Never ride empty. Carry a reason.
Then this isn't cloth. It's testimony.
If after I tell you the story you still want it retired, I'll fold it right here.
Or we carry it.
Read the ink. It's a map of gratitude.
You're not riding alone anymore. This flag doesn't need to retire, it needs an escort.
Don't blink. One gust of wind turned laughter into silence. In a sun-baked parking lot, outside a roadside diner, a group of bikers pointed at a veteran's tattered flag and cracked jokes. Then the veteran turned the fabric, and the names inked across those faded stripes hit them like a thunderclap. They weren't rips, they were reminders. And every signature belonged to someone the bikers called a hero. Picture this, a sun-baked highway, engines roaring, chrome flashing like lightning. A man steps off a dusty bike, holding a tattered flag, faded, frayed, barely holding together. Laughter explodes from a crowd of bikers. Nice rag, someone smirks. Freeze this moment. In the next few minutes, the same people laughing will be fighting for the honor of carrying that flag. Stay with me, Evan Morales wasn't flashy. A quiet mechanic with steady eyes and grease under his nails, he rolled into the Crosswind Diner, the weekend meeting point for the Iron Relics Motorcycle Club. His flag, folded, patched, and worn down by wind and time, was strapped to a wooden pole on the back of his old Yamaha. He walked in for coffee. He walked into a storm. "Hey man," a tall rider with a silver beard called out. "What's with the shredded curtain?" A few chuckles. A woman with crimson gloves shook her head. "At least retire it before it disintegrates." Evan didn't snap back. He just set the flag beside him, calm as stone. But inside, his heart was hammering, because if they knew whose signatures lived on that fabric, they wouldn't just stop laughing, they'd stand. Crosswind Diner smelled like hot coffee, fried eggs, and road dust. In neon buzzed over a jukebox that hadn't worked right since the 90s. Outside, dozens of bikes lined up in a proud chrome spine, the Iron Relics patch, skull and pistons, glinting on leather vests. This was their turf, their clubhouse with pancakes, and Evan had just walked in with something that looked like a challenge nailed to a stick. He slid onto a stool. The waitress poured him coffee with a kind smile, the only soft thing in the room. Conversations didn't stop. They sharpened. "And brought a scarecrow," someone muttered. "Looks like it lost a fight with a tornado," another snorted. The silver-bearded rider eased closer, curious and cocky at the same time. "Seriously, brother, what's the story? You run out of rags at the shop?" Evan wrapped both hands around the mug. Steady, he could take the heat. He'd taken worse. The flag leaned against the counter, edges whispering in the air-conditioned draft. Threads catching the light like scars. He didn't look at the hecklers. He looked at the flag. He always did. That fabric had seen more miles than some of these riders' odometers. It had seen deserts, storms, and nights that didn't end until dawn. It had seen loss. It had seen promise. The woman in crimson gloves stepped up, trying to soften the tone and still keep the edge. "Not judging," she said, "but people retire old flags for a reason." Evan nodded once. "People retire a lot of things," he said quietly. "Stories, promises, names." She frowned, thrown off by the answer. A younger guy in a sleeveless denim vest tilted his head and reached toward the cloth, just a fingertip's worth of curiosity. Evan's hand caught the pole halfway up. Not a slap. Not a grab. Just a firm guard. The room tilted. Forks stopped clinking. Chairs paused mid-scratch. The message was clear. This wasn't just fabric to him. From the last booth, an older rider watched with folded arms, eyes like weathered stone. He didn't laugh. He didn't join the circle. He just took it in. The Iron Relics called him Mac. You could feel respect bend around him like heat. Evan set his cup down and exhaled, slow. He'd kept the flag close on purpose. Not for show. For breath. For the memory of voices that still felt warm in the coldest miles. He ran his thumb over a patch sewn into the corner, crooked, rugged, made by someone who knew a needle from a bullet hole. The patch wasn't pretty. It was loyal. "Look, man," the silver-bearded rider said, tone dipping from mock to something like warning. "Some folks would call that disrespect. A flag that beat up? In public, a murmur of agreement rolled through the room. You could feel the club line up on the side of tradition. Ivan didn't flinch. Disrespect, he repeated, tasting the word. If you knew where this has been, you'd call it the opposite, a beat. Then another. The bikes outside ticked as their engines cooled, like a clock counting down. The woman in crimson gloves crossed her arms but leaned in. Okay, then say it. Where's it been? A couple of riders smirked, ready to pounce. Ivan turned the pole gently so the flag lay flat across the counter. Up close, the fabric told a story no one across the room could see. Ink faded by sun, strokes of handwriting tucked along seams, initials nestled into frayed edges, a small burn mark near the middle where a campfire spark had kissed it under a cold sky. He didn't lift his voice. He didn't need to. You're looking at miles, he said softly. At nights that mattered. At hens you'd recognize if you stopped to see. The smirks wobbled just a little. Someone at the back muttered, "What's on it?" No answer yet. Not the names. Not the thunder. Just the weight. Evan glanced toward the door like he could still hear the highway. Then he looked every single rider in the eye, one by one, and set the pole down with care. I'll finish this coffee, he said. And if, after I tell you the story of this flag, you still want me to retire it, I will. Right here. A hush dropped. Even the neon hum seemed to hold its breath. Don't blink. This is the part where engines go quiet before everything flips. Stay with me, Evan asked the counter lady for coffee. He kept his voice low. The bikers didn't. Two of them drifted closer, boots thudding, leather creaking like a warning. You always ride with that? The woman in crimson gloves asked, trying to sound curious. But her voice had an edge that could cut. Always, Evan said. Since the day it came home. The silver-bearded rider smirked, folding his arms so his patches flashed. Home from where? The thrift store? A few more laughs bounced off the chrome and tile. Someone at a booth muttered, disrespectful to carry it like that. Evan blinked slowly. He'd heard that word before. It never got easier. You think it's disrespect? He asked softly. You're about to find out the opposite. Another rider reached, just an inch too close, to brush the frayed edge like you'd test the fabric of a shirt you didn't plan to buy. Ivan's hand flashed up, not aggressive, but protective, a steady stop between curious fingers and old cloth. The room chilled. Forks stopped clinking. The jukebox clicked and hummed like it couldn't decide on the next track. Even the steam from Evan's coffee rose quieter. The message landed. This wasn't just fabric. From the far booth, the oldest man in the room stood. Mac, broad shoulders, road-map face, eyes that had seen 100 sunrises from 1,000 miles of asphalt, didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Let the man speak, he said, gravel-deep. There's something in his eyes you should pay attention to. The crimson-gloved woman shifted, uncertain now. The silver-bearded rider rolled his jaw, bravado slipping an inch. Ivan looked at Mac, then at the flag. It leaned against the counter like a tired traveler. You're right, he said. There's a story here. And if you still want me to throw it out when I'm done, I will. Every head turned. Engines outside ticked as they cooled, tiny metal heartbeats marking time. The waitress, her name tag reading Fran, set the pot down and stayed. Even she wanted to hear this. Evan wrapped his fingers around the pole, thumb tracing a rough seam where a patch had been stitched in by a hand that didn't do pretty, but did permanent. He wasn't stalling. He was steadying. Since the day it came home wasn't a line for effect. It was a promise he'd made on a porch with a box he couldn't open without shaking. You're sure you want to do this here? Mac asked, softer now. Evan nodded. Right here, where people can see what they're laughing at. The silver-bearded rider tried one more jab, but it came out thin. We respect flags in this club. That one looks like it lost a fight. Evan met his eyes. It didn't lose. It survived, the room pressed in. Boots scraped. Chairs angled toward him. A couple of younger riders, fresh faces behind dark sunglasses, looked between Mac and Evan, reading the shift, sensing this wasn't a bar fight brewing, but something you stood up straight for. Evan lifted the flag just an inch and let it settle again, like you'd set down a memory with care. He didn't unroll it yet. He wanted them to hear before they saw. You're calling it disrespect, he said, voice even. I call it miles. I call it nights that kept someone brave. I call it names. That last word made the crimson-gloved woman tilt her head. Names? Look, Evan continued, glancing around the circle. I get it. You see rips. You see sun-bleached edges. You think careless. But some things wear out because they sit forgotten. This wore out because it did the opposite. The silver-bearded rider's mouth closed. He wasn't convinced, but he wasn't laughing either. Mac eased a step closer, palms open, no threat, all respect. Say your piece. Evan nodded, grateful for the permission he didn't need but appreciated. A while back, he said, this flag came home folded different than it left. I promised I'd keep it moving, keep it breathing. Not boxed up. Not polished to death. He glanced at the crimson-gloved woman. Retirement wasn't the point. Remembrance was. The younger rider who'd reached earlier shifted, guilt crossing his face. Didn't mean to disrespect, he muttered. Evan gave him a small nod. You didn't know yet. Outside, a truck rolled by, bass rattling the windows, then faded. Inside, the quiet settled deeper, not empty, waiting. Fran leaned on the counter, chin tucked in her palm, eyes glossy with interest. This was more than diner drama. This was a hinge moment. Evan took a breath that moved his shoulders and his memory. I'm going to show you what's on it, he said. Up close. After that, if you still want me to retire it, if you really think it's wrong to let it ride with me, I'll fold it right here and leave it with you. He let that offer hang. It wasn't bluff. It was faith that once you saw, you couldn't unsee. The silver-bearded rider opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once, barely. The crimson-gloved woman uncrossed her arms. The younger guys in denim leaned in. Mac didn't move at all. He just watched Evan like a man honoring a mile marker he'd been waiting to reach. Every engine outside seemed to go quiet. Every eye inside fixed on the cloth. This was about to get real. Evan unfolded the flag with reverence, laying it across the counter like a veteran laying down truth. Up close, the wear told a journey. Sun-bleached corners, tiny scorch marks, road grit woven into the threads. And then the ink. Faint loops and slashes, names, dozens of them. He placed a finger near the top seam. Luis Morales, he said, voice catching. My brother. This flag rode 6 tours with him. It came back when he didn't. The room shifted, boots stilled, throats tightened. No one spoke. Evan traced another signature with a mechanic's careful touch. Hawk Jennings, he said. A ripple moved through the iron relics, like wind through wheat. Mac's head snapped up. You knew Hawk? He asked, stunned. Evan nodded. He held this flag at a charity ride in El Paso. Signed it with a Sharpie he kept in his boot. Said, never ride empty, carry a reason. The woman in crimson gloves leaned closer, squinting as if the past might rise from the fabric. No way, she whispered. That says Big Sal Navarro. Her voice cracked. He taught my dad to ride in a church parking lot when I was 8. Evan's smile was soft and sad. Big Sal added his name at the Dustfire rally, he said. Told me this cloth had more miles than most odometers, and not to clean it too pretty. Real stories wear scars, he said. Eyes scanned the fabric now, hungry, humbled. Elila, Dustfire reigns, a signature that arced like a comet tail. Ghost Carter, the long-haul legend who never stayed in one place long enough for the ink to dry. His scrawl tilted and fast. Ride for those who can't. There were others. Smaller, but no less fierce. Mama Joe Vega, who organized food drives from a garage stacked with tires. Torque Valdez, a mentor who fixed more bikes for free than anyone could count. A simple Rev Pete, the chaplain who said blessings over busted engines and brave hearts. Evan shifted the flag so the light caught a faded fingerprint. Dark, oval, ground into the cloth. Hawk left that, he said. He'd just finished changing someone's flat on the shoulder and laughed when he realized his hands were still greasy. Said, guess I signed it twice? Near the center, a brown kiss of a coffee ring ghosted the fabric. Big Sal wouldn't put his cup down when he told me I was doing right. Said the world moves faster than respect, and somebody's got to slow it down. They saw what they had missed from across the room. The scorch mark came from a campfire spark when the flag hung between 2 bikes under a black sky. The tiny stitches along the bottom seam were done by Evan's mother, hands shaking but stubborn. So it won't unravel while you ride, she'd said, sliding a thimble off like a shield. And in the hem, barely there, Evan's own initials, a promise hidden in plain sight. I didn't collect signatures for fame, he said, eyes on the cloth, not on the crowd. I did it because Luis wrote me from overseas. He said, find the people who kept me brave. Thank them for me. Keep this flag where the wind can find it. Evan swallowed, then tapped a cluster of tiny initials that clung to a corner like a constellation. Some of these aren't famous. A nurse who rode weekends. A teacher who patched gear for free. A dad who led toy runs every winter. Luis said bravery isn't loud. It just lasts. Mac stepped closer, reverence softening his weathered face. I rode with Hawk in 03, he murmured. That Sharpie in the boot thing. He did it at every stop. The silver-bearded rider who'd smirked earlier didn't look up. His gaze stayed on the flag like he was reading a prayer. The younger guys leaned in, with the fear of touching a museum piece and the awe of standing near it. Evan traced the edge again, then let his palms settle over the fabric, steadying it the way you steady words that matter. When the box came home, he said quietly, This was folded inside with Luis's note. I couldn't let it sit under glass, not yet. It needed to breathe, where the world could see what he loved, who he trusted, and why he kept going. He tilted the flag, showing the faint imprint of a boot tread across a pale corner. A soldier stepped on it once by accident, apologized like he'd stepped on a name. Luis wrote that the guy cried anyway. No one laughed now. The diner's neon hum sounded like a held breath. The woman in crimson gloves pressed her knuckles to her mouth. Mac bowed his head for a heartbeat, then lifted it again, eyes bright with heat that wasn't anger. Evan exhaled. I could have framed it. I could have kept it clean. But then it would just be cloth. This? He tapped a signature, where the ink had bled through to the other side. This is a map of gratitude. A moving thank you. He looked around the circle, meeting eyes that didn't look away anymore. This flag is my way of keeping that promise. Everything flipped. The laughter vanished like smoke. Mac reached out, fingers trembling, and barely touched the corner. You carried this all the way here? Evan nodded. Across 12 states. Through rain, desert, a wildfire detour. I strapped it to a cheap wooden pole because I wanted it close. Not spotless, alive. The silver-bearded rider stepped forward, face red. I said it was a rag, he muttered. I was wrong. He looked Evan in the eye. I'm sorry. The woman in crimson gloves exhaled hard. We judged too fast. We ride tough, but we forgot to look closer. Evan shrugged gently. Most people do. Max straightened, something solemn rising in him. This flag doesn't need to retire, he said. It needs an escort. He turned to the club. Saddles up. We ride for Luis. We ride for every name on this cloth. The diner erupted, not in noise, but in purpose. Chairs scraped back like a starting bell. Jackets zipped, patches flashing. Helmets locked with decisive clicks. Fran set down a stack of napkins like they were folded honors. Someone rolled out a shadow box and a pair of microfiber gloves. Not to bury the flag, but to handle it with respect while they secured it. The younger riders jogged outside. One checked tire pressure. Another topped off tanks. A kid from the kitchen rushed in with zip ties and paracord. The silver-bearded rider, humbled now, knelt by Evan's Yamaha, tightening the mount so the pole wouldn't sway. No rattle today, he said, voice steady. The woman in crimson gloves stepped behind Mac. I'll sweep, she volunteered. No one falls behind. Mac took command with the easy authority of a road captain who's led 100 rides. Formation staggered. Visors up until the highway. No burnouts, no showboating. This is a procession, he looked to Evan. You ride center. We're your windbreak, they rolled out as one. Engines fired like a choir warming up, low, resonant, unified. The tattered flag rose, caught the light and snapped once, clean and sharp, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Asphalt unfurled, horizon opened. Every mile felt like a sentence completed. On the frontage road, a crew of workers paused, hard hats lifted. At the first intersection, a police cruiser idled. The officer stepped out and stood at attention, palm to brow as the procession slipped past. A school bus slowed, faces pressed to the glass, hands waving. The woman in crimson gloves lifted 2 fingers off her clutch in a small salute. The silver-bearded rider took point, left hand signaling turns with old-school precision. Mac rode just off Evan's shoulder, a steady anchor. They didn't blast music. They didn't rev for spectacle. The sound was a steady, reverent drum. At a hilltop overlook, Mac motioned them to pull in. Kickstands dropped in a metallic chorus. No one lit a cigarette. No one told a joke. Evan eased the flag free with careful hands. The microfiber gloves appeared. The silver-bearded rider offered them like an apology. Evan shook his head, smiling. Let it breathe. He held the cloth so the names caught the sun. Mac cleared his throat. Read a few, he asked. Evan nodded and began. In Luis Morales, the club answered in one voice, quiet but unshakable. Present. He read another. Hawk Jennings, present. Big Sal Navarro, present. Each name rang like a mile marker cut into the sky. The woman in crimson gloves blinked hard and whispered, For Dad, under her breath. Back on the highway, the wind pushed tears sideways across Evan's cheeks and the sun dried them before they fell. He watched the flag's shadow flutter across his tank and thought of a porch light that never got turned off. Of letters that arrived with sand in their folds, of promises made when nobody was listening. He wasn't alone in those thoughts anymore. You could feel the whole column, carrying it with him, shoulder to shoulder, throttle to throttle. A mile of scorched earth slid by, blackened brush where last year's fire had jumped the road. Evan felt the flag tug and remembered the detour that night. The smoke, the red sky, the decision to keep moving because stopping didn't feel like honoring anything. Now, flanked by the iron relics, that same stretch felt different. Not haunted, held. They passed a small roadside memorial, fresh flowers, a simple cross, a ribbon fluttering. Mac tapped his chest, and the whole group mirrored him, a silent promise in motion. A trucker on the overpass laid on a long, low horn that sounded less like noise and more like respect. When they finally turned back toward the diner, the engines settled into a contented hum. Evan's grip loosened. His shoulders fell an inch. A weight he'd worn for miles, years, felt redistributed, spread across a dozen bikes, a dozen hearts. The flag cracked once more in the wind, not as decoration, but as proof. And for the first time in a long time, Evan felt lighter. He wasn't carrying the story alone anymore. They didn't stop at a victory lap. Back at the diner, the club built a clear case for the flag. UV glass, oak frame, a brass plate that read, "Respect is not about perfection. It's about what survived." Evan placed the flag inside, then paused. One more thing. He pulled out a fresh marker. "Today's date," he said, writing it carefully. "For the day a mistake turned into a mission." The room gathered close, a ring of leather and road dust, the clink of tools and soft scrape of sandpaper as someone eased a rough edge on the frame. Fran slid a tray of waters down the counter like an offering. The silver-bearded rider stood with his hands behind his back, posture straight, yes sir straight, as if an invisible inspection were happening. "I said it wrong earlier," he murmured, voice rough. "I won't say it wrong again." Evan looked up, nodded once. Forgiveness didn't need a speech. Mac took the brass plate, thumb rubbing the corner, as if he could press the words deeper into the metal. "Indebted here," he told the carpenter, an iron relic with sawdust still in his beard, who happened to keep a small woodshop in his garage. The plate settled with a tiny tap that sounded like a vow. A teenager in an oversized hoodie hovered near the doorway, eyes huge, helmet tucked under his arm. "Can I—" he started, then stopped. The woman in crimson gloves motioned him forward. "You can look," she said gently. "Just don't tap the glass." He leaned in and breathed out a quiet, "Whoa," the kind that starts new traditions. Evan uncapped the marker again and wrote below the date, "For the ones who kept him brave." Then he pressed the marker into the silver-bearded rider's hand. "Add yours," he said. "Not your name, your promise." The man swallowed, then wrote in block letters along the frame's inner lip. "We will look closer." Others followed. The crimson-gloved woman penned, "Ride for those who can't." Someone else added, "No one rides alone." The frame became not just a display, but a pledge. Mac faced the group. "From now on, the Iron Relics start every season with a rite of names," he declared, voice carrying like a bell. "We'll raise funds for families, fix bikes for free, and we'll remember what these threads stand for." Heads nodded. A helmet landed on the counter, turned into an instant donation jar. Bills appeared without fanfare. A rider in a denim vest said, "I can set up a relief fund page tonight." Another added, "I'll print decals, proceeds to the families." The silver-bearded rider stepped forward. "Evan," he said, voice steady now, "let us carry your promise with you." Evan smiled, eyes bright. Then my brother's request got answered twice. He glanced at the glass, at his own reflection, layered over those signatures. He asked me to thank the ones who kept him brave. "Looks like I just found more of them." Mac tapped the frame. "We're not putting this behind the counter like a trophy," he said. "It hangs right by the door, where everyone walks past it. And once a year, we uncase it, we mount it, and we ride it." He pointed to the hinges. "We built this to open." They hung the case, where the afternoon sun spilled across the wall. The UV glass dulled the glare, letting the ink glow without fading. Someone stuck a small placard beneath it with a QR code. "Scan to share a name for next season's ride." Beside it, Fran taped up a simple sign. "Need help with a bike? Saturdays, no charge. Bring a story." The woman in crimson gloves pulled out her phone, hands trembling just a little. She dialed, waited. "Dad?" she said when the call connected. "You won't believe this. Big Sal's signature, yeah, on a flag at Crosswind." She listened, eyes glassing over, then laughed softly. "I know. I'll bring you tomorrow." She hung up, took off one glove, and touched the oak frame with the back of her fingers, the way you greet a memory. Evan stood there a long moment, not speaking. He thought about the porch where the box had arrived, about the note that told him to keep this moving, about the miles he'd ridden with only the wind to testify. Now the room testified with him, Mac's steady presence. The silver-bearded rider's humble distance closed. The club's quiet readiness to do more than clap. More than pose, more than post. He turned and faced them. "If you ever forget why you ride," he said, "read the names. Not just the famous ones. Read the small ones in the corners. Say them out loud." Mac nodded and answered first, a low rumble that others echoed. "Present." The word rolled around the diner like thunder without lightning. "By the register!" A little girl tugged her mom's sleeve and pointed up. "Why is it so wrinkly?" she asked. Her mom smiled. "Because it went far," she whispered. Evan heard and smiled too. It was the best answer he'd ever heard. The sun slid lower, lighting the flag with a warm, forgiving glow. Outside, the bikes clicked as they cooled, lined up like guardians on a quiet watch. A couple on a road trip stepped in and stopped, faces softening as they read the brass plate. No one rushed them. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a stop you made on purpose. As the sun dipped low, that diner felt sacred. Not because of spotless chrome, but because a worn flag reminded everyone of something bigger. The stories we don't see until we stop laughing and start listening. And if you've ever felt misunderstood, if you've ever carried something others didn't get, this one's for you. If this story hit you right in the chest, tap that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder to look closer. And subscribe for more powerful, true life tales. New stories every week that'll give you chills, courage, and a reason to keep writing forward. Question for you. What's one worn-out item you own that looks ordinary, but carries a story you'll never let go of? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading every single one.